Lieutenant Marie recalled, at a word from Colonel Pegram, the leading gun, a 3-inch rifle piece of accuracy and long range, was at once unlimbered and swung around. I had noticed that we were halted by a house on the roadside with a porch in front. And as the order was given to load with shrapnel shell, a man in his shirt sleeves rushed out of the house on the porch and exclaimed, "My God, you are not going to fire here, are you?" Hello, I'm Tim Smith of Gettysburg History, and welcome to another episode of Monuments Monday. And in this episode, we're going to talk about the first shot of the Battle of Gettysburg. You know, I really guess it depends upon how you qualify what the first shot is, and people argue about this being the first shot versus that, but this first shot is a shot that resulted in consecutive shots that then led to the actual Battle of Gettysburg. And you can see the first shot marker behind me. It's about 3 miles west of Gettysburg along the Chambersburg Turnpike. And if you look at the auto tour map of the Gettysburg Battlefield, you'll actually see a little space that the park owns out here around the first shot marker and the Ephraim Wisler house. You know, for the vedettes of General John Buford's Union cavalry, the sun on the morning of July 1st rose in a cloudless sky. Lieutenant Marcellus Jones of Company E, 8th Illinois Cavalry, had just purchased a loaf of bread and some oats for his horse from a nearby farm when he saw George Heim coming full speed towards him from the main picket post along the Chambersburg Pike. Sergeant Schaefer wanted to see him. He swung into his saddle and within minutes joined the vedette's post near a blacksmith shop owned by Ephraim Wisler. A cloud of dust could be seen rising out of the trees along the road some distance ahead, an unmistakable sign of advancing troops. Lieutenant Jones tore a page from his memorandum book. He scribbled a message on it that there was evidently a heavy column approaching and sent that message to the major of the 8th Illinois that was near the Her Tavern or in the Her Tavern. And then, according to Horace Dodge, George Sager of the group exclaimed, "Here they come." So saying, he drew up his carbine and began to take aim. Lieutenant Jones, seeing him, said, "Hold on, George, give me the honor of opening the ball." And handing me his reins, he took Sergeant Schaefer's carbine, rested it across a rail fence, and fired at the commanding officer of the column of rebel infantry, which came across Marsh Creek Bridge, and thus opened the Battle of Gettysburg. As well as the first shot by Marcellus Jones is known to Gettysburg aficionados, it's interesting to note that there are no Confederate accounts that actually talk about a shot being fired at them in this encounter. Lieutenant John Marie of the Fredericksburg Artillery was near the head of Heath's column on July 1st as it approached the northern pickets. He recorded that the morning was lovely. A soft breeze rippled over the ripe wheat field stretching away on either side of us. We moved forward leisurely, smoking and chatting as we rode along, not dreaming of the proximity of the enemy. Also near the front of the column was Captain William Chamberlain, and he rode alongside Colonel Lindsey Walker and Colonel William J. Pegram, all of the Confederate artillery. As they reached the crossing at Marsh Creek, the place looked suspicious. The banks of the stream were covered with trees and underbrush. At this point, Colonel Pegram's attention was suddenly called to what in the distance seemed to be a line of men on a hill in front of us. too far distant to discern the colors of the uniform. Colonel Pegram deemed it prudent, however, to halt his column. James Archer's brigade was brought forward, and the 5th Alabama Battalion and 3 companies of the 13th Tenant Alabama were thrown out on either side of the road, and that detachment moved forward as a skirmish line. As the infantry moved into position, an artillery piece was ordered to fire a few rounds and occupy the enemy's attention. Lieutenant Murray recalled, at a word from Colonel Pegram, the leading gun, a 3-inch rifle piece of accuracy and long range, was at once unlimbered and swung around. I had noticed that we were halted by a house on the roadside with a porch in front. And as the order was given to load with shrapnel shell, a man in his shirt sleeves rushed out of the house on the porch and exclaimed, "My God, you are not going to fire here, are you?" He threw up his hands and disappeared at top speed. At the word fire, the shell went screaming across the fields and burst high above the line of men on the hill, and thus was fired the first shot of one of the greatest battles of modern times. We fired several shells from the gun in rapid succession, receiving no immediate response. Now, the guy that came running out undoubtedly was Adams County resident Samuel Lohr. The house from which the artillery piece was fired was right across the other side of a bridge on what is known as Lohr's Hill. Samuel Lohr was 53 years old at the time of the battle, and most local records refer to him as Major Lohr, as he had been an officer in the Pennsylvania militia for many years prior to the war. In the 1886 history of Adams County, the shot is mentioned. It's, quote, Samuel Lohr lived on a farm from which the first cannon was fired in front of their house at the beginning of the Battle of Gettysburg. And although the cannon fired a few rounds from this position, its fire would have a devastating effect on one local family. In 1903, the following story was related by local resident and historian Aaron Shealy. The first cannon shot of the Battle of Gettysburg was fired Confederates from a battery stationed on Lohr's Hill, several hundred yards west of Marsh Creek on the Chambersburg Pike. On the first hill east of that position resided at the time a blacksmith by the name of Ephraim Wisler. Noticing certain strange movements and actions of small bodies of armed men in the vicinity of his house, but not dreaming that they were the advance guard of the Confederate Army, Mr. Wisler stepped out from the gate opening from his yard to the pike to observe what was going on. At this instance, the first gun stationed on Lohr's Hill, as already described, was discharged, the ball of which, a 12-pound solid shot, struck the pike immediately in front of him, plowing up the solid roadbed and scattering the ground over him. The shock to his nervous system was so great that he became completely prostrated. He took to his bed soon after and never rose from it. The exact details of the story as given in the account may never be known for sure. Of course, it wasn't a 12-pounder ball. It was a rifled shell, as we learned from the Confederate account. But one thing's for certain. Ephraim Wisler, a master blacksmith, did in fact die on August 11th, 1863, at just 31 years of age. He was buried in Lower Marsh Creek Presbyterian Cemetery, a short distance from his home. Upon the death of Ephraim Wisler, left a widow and 2 small children behind. In 1886, Marcellus Jones of Naperville, Illinois, had a stone made. I believe it's out of Naperville sandstone. You can put something in the comments or the description if you know differently. But This monument was brought to Gettysburg, not in 1886, even though it says 1886, but it was brought here in July 1887. And we actually have an article in our newspaper called The Heroes of Gettysburg about the dedication of the monument. And it describes it. Marcellus Jones, Lieutenant Ridler, Sergeant Schaefer, and a guy named E.H. Ditzler of Naperville were the members that came here on the trip to place the monument at the spot where Marcellus Jones fired the first shot of the Battle of Gettysburg. Remember, if you like all the content that we continue to put up on our YouTube channel, please like and subscribe.